Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Today I am going to do or attempt to do the Victorian Literature Journey Tag, which was created by Ros at Skelly Dandying About the Books and Tilly of Tilly's Shelf. I have the honor of having been tagged independently both by Hannah of Hannah's Books and Aaron Facer of his eponymous BookTube channel. I watched all of those videos at the time that they were released, and unfortunately I've been on the road somewhat and been unable to respond. Because of that, I will not tag anybody because the BookTube event called Victober is nearing its end, and I imagine that most everybody has done the tag that is inclined to do so. If you happen to come upon this and you are not a BookTube regular, or you just feel inclined to do this tag, then please feel free to do it. I will list the prompts in the description below, and also with links to those previous videos that I mentioned. Now, this tag was created as sort of a reworking of the Shakespeare Journey Tag, which was originally done by Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading, Nicole at A Day of Small Things, and Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse. Now, I did that Shakespeare Journey Tag, and I feel much more suited for that tag because I at least have read Shakespeare. I've read very little Victorian literature and did not know it was a cat again. Did not know it was a thing really until I started hanging out in the environs of BookTube. So Victober is a yearly event in which readers are dedicated to focus on literature of the Victorian era. And this year, I have focused on one book, which is Silas Marner by George Eliot. That's the book that I read. I've had a hard time with jibing my schedule with BookTube events, but if I continue with this, I hope to become more in sync. So, the first prompt is, what was your first experience reading Victorian literature, and how was it? And I would guess that my first experience was this book. Not in this copy, of course, but a book which we had to read in high school. So I would guess that that was my first experience, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Cat above the camera. How was it? Well, I remember liking the book, but that's about all that I remember from that experience. Now, I should go further to say, and followers of my channel will know that I have not been a long-time dedicated reader, but I have wormed in a little reading here and there. And in fact, some of this stuff in answer to the prompts will be known to people already. There will be some duplication here. But when I was young, while I was not a reader, I wanted to become a reader. And my sister was a reader. And what started out with several of the novels of Jane Austen, which she and I read, not together, but the book would get passed along. And I understand Jane Austen is not quite Victorian. I don't know exactly the dates of Victoria's reign or her life. I'm not sure which counts for Victorian, but that led, as you might expect, into reading of the Brontes, and I read Jane Eyre, which I think that I liked, and I read Wuthering Heights, which I think that I did not like, and I read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which I liked very much. And then Tenant of Wildfell Hall was a book which I went back to probably at about the age of 25 and reread and again liked very much. It's not a regular thing for me to reread books, but that was one of the few cases, and there have been a good handful of cases. Without going off on too many tangents, let me try to cleave to the prompts. Has the reading of a Victorian book ever brought you to tears? If so, tell us more. I cannot say for sure that it has. I don't know. I can't, of course, remember anything from the high school experience of Dickens, but some years back, I knocked one off of my bucket list and read Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, and I would bet there are scenes in there that if they didn't cause the tears to flow, at least caused the eyes to well up. I can't say for sure, but I would bet dollars to donuts, as they say. There are many poignant moments in that book. Are there any people who have played a significant role in your Victorian literature journey? Well, as I say, I have not been upon a dedicated Victorian literature journey, but insofar as I have gone that way, I would have to give my sister credit for being a reader, being something of an intrepid reader back in those days. Do you have a favorite film or TV adaptation of a Victorian book? And that is very easy, and I've brought this up as well. It is the film by Carol Reed of Lionel Bart's musical, Oliver. Now, I have a cast recording of the musical somewhere, which includes one song that was not in the movie. And because I was not exposed to the original musical when I was young, that song does not hold the weight as the songs in this one. Now, it's a movie I recommend that if you are going to see, you try to see it on a big screen, because I tried looking at it on something small and it just did not work so well. Now, I don't know anything about Lionel Bart, but as a person who's worked somewhat in musical theater, absolutely everybody that you come in contact with bows down or bowed down to Stephen Sondheim. And personally, I think that lyrically, at least, everything in this is heads above Sondheim. Consider yourself at home. Consider yourself part of the family. We've taken to you so strong. It's clear we're going to get along. And then, I'd do anything for you, dear. Anything for you mean everything to me. Would you climb a hill? Anything. Wear a daffodil, and so forth. of course, my favorite song is the one sung by Nancy. There's a little ditty they're singing in the city, especially when they've been on the gin or the beer. If you got the patience, your own imaginations will tell you just exactly what you want to hear. Papa, that's how it goes. And so forth. And then Mr. Percy Snodgrass would often have the odd glass, but never when he thought anybody could see. Secretly he'd buy it and drink it on the quiet and dream he was an earl with a girl on each knee. And back to the refrain. I don't think I could convey how sophisticated those lyrics are. I mean, if you have not seen the movie, and you may not like the movie, but definitely the soundtrack is worth hearing. I have had the fortune of seeing a very excellent stage production as well more recently, and everything about it holds up. So that was great. And then last year I read Oliver Twist by Dickens, and I felt that everything that Carol Reed, the director, cut for the movie could well have been cut by Dickens in his novel, and that the movie adhered scrupulously close to the text of Dickens. And as I say, everything that Carol Reed left out was needless. Mark Lester famously played Oliver, and if you've seen other Carol Reed movies, you would know that he had a reputation for bringing out wondrous performances from child actors. Fallen Idol, I think, was the one standout movie. He did The Third Man, but I don't think that had a child actor in it. And I don't remember, was Odd Man out his? It may have been. But anyhow, this is not a tag about Carol Reed. Now, is there one that I would like to see made? I cannot speak for that. I haven't read enough. I believe I did see the Roman Polanski version of Oliver Twist, which seemed to me largely in style copied from Carol Reed, and not very memorable. Nothing particularly well done about that. Which character in Victorian literature most resembles you, or you identify with most? Well, there I can't speak. When I was young, as many boys, I would imagine, the character that I wanted to be like was the Artful Dodger, portrayed by Jack Wilde, who I believe never was able to outlive that magnificent role, and did not have a stellar career after that. I believe he had something of an unfortunate career thereafter. Mark Lester is a different thing. I won't mention anything about where his life led. I wanted to be the Artful Dodger, and in fact, after I had seen the movie, I must have been 5 or so when it was originally released in the theaters. I created out of paper a top hat, and then I think he had some kind of a cape or something, and I taped a cape to the top hat so I would put on the hat, and then there was a cape. Of course, capes generally don't come from the hat, but that's what I did as a boy, and I was so smitten with the Artful Dodger. And then, of course, when I read Oliver Twist in the Dickens version, I was aghast that the Artful Dodger was not nearly so compelling a character, but so it is. Do you have a favorite moment, scene, or line from Victorian literature? I'm probably going to, well, there are. If I'm sticking to the Carol Reed movie, it was probably when Fagin loses all of his gems and whatnot into the brine or whatever that is. In this life, one thing counts, in the bank, large amounts. I'm afraid these don't grow on trees. You've got to pick a pocket or two. But from Tess, there are moments, particularly Hardy was ahead of his time in his concerns for the welfare of animals. And there are extremely poignant scenes in Tess, the one where they're cutting down the field, making it a diminishing rectangular space, and the animals becoming frenzied and so forth. And then there is also a memorable scene, I believe, where Tess comes upon the scene where a duck hunting event or something of that sort had occurred. And they're very, very poignant. From the Brontes, I can remember nothing. And from A Tale of Two Cities, nothing. The other memorable Victorian books that I've read have been George Eliot's. I started with Middlemarch, which I liked okay. And then last year, the best book of my entire year last year was Romola, a historical drama, quite an anomaly in her work. She dedicated tons of blood, sweat, and tears to the research for that novel, and it paid off for somebody like me particularly, who had heard about Savonarola throughout his life and never really understood this charismatic priest's figure. And she gave flesh to the man, and it made the whole novel just sing for me. All of that, the bonfire of the vanities in that novel, it was very memorable. But there are so many moments from Romola that are memorable. Does any Victorian literature intimidate you? If so, what and why? Probably yes, probably most of it because it's so long. Any of the Dickens intimidates me. Now, I'm not really, it's interesting. Earlier in the year, I hurt my eyes or exhausted my eyes by reading too much, and I decided to do some audiobook listening, and I tried to do this one, A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens, and I just found it insufferable. I mean, it starts, and you get the sense of Dickens straining at the bit to be humorous in a circuitous way, and it was just so hard to take. And so I chucked it. I DNF'd it, not permanently, but I chucked it in favor of Edith Wharton, who I figured as an American might cut to the chase a little bit more. And it worked. And I wound up reading 3 of her novels, and that pared down prose style worked for me a lot better than Dickens. Now I read last year, in addition to Oliver Twist, I read Great Expectations, and I liked that. It was a bit windy at times, or long-winded, but nevertheless, I was pleased with it, but I could not handle that. I recently saw the version of this tag done by Jennifer Brooks, and she mentioned that the ending of this book is so good, and people tend to wish that an ending that good had been appended to a better book for the first half or whatever. So that gives me encouragement to read this book one day. I did buy this copy with the hopes of, in the dumbed down Penguin style, in the hopes of possibly reading more Dickens, although having just finished Silas Marner, I've realized that I could easily see myself becoming a George Eliot completist if I live through so many Victobers, perhaps. What tips would you give to someone early on in their Victorian literature journey? That I can't say. I would have to say follow your heart. Go with what appeals to you. Last year I read The Warden by Anthony Trollope and couldn't stand it, but I've seen so many booktubers speak of how they loved that book. So I would say if you pick up any book by anybody and you love that book, then you should probably continue with it. Otherwise, it's hard for me to say. Victorian literature is not really my bag, so to speak. I am really hoping to hit this sometime, but I realize that I'm probably better with English of a more recent vintage. However, there have been many good things spoken about this author, and I would like to touch some of the other Victorian greats that I do keep hearing about on BookTube. So perhaps I will get there. I should mention, just as a sort of side note, I am close to finishing this book, and I believe it was published in 1970, but it is set very much in Victorian times, probably within a decade after the Great Exhibition, which saw the creation of the Crystal Palace. And one thing that I really like about it is that it shows you perhaps the seamier side of British colonialism, which was indeed the hallmark of the Victorian era. You know, one of the elements in the backdrop is the production of opium, which was very important. There's some relevance in Silas Marner as well. And you realize that this capitalist, I guess you have to say, ideology whereby making profit, wringing profit out of this planet, regardless of the expense, regardless of the cost, regardless of the harm done to other people, done to animals, that sort of ethos is not sustainable. And that was hugely a part of the Victorian era. So while we have the byproduct in all of these novels and so forth, they do carry a cost. And I think it comes across very well in this. There is some tongue-in-cheek reference made to the ideas of Darwin, which I don't know had been published at the time that this novel is set, but obviously the ideas were in the air, and of course J.G. Farrell had the benefit of hindsight. So I will leave this tag there. I hope I have done it justice, and I want to thank Hannah and Aaron for tagging me. I appreciate the opportunity to do a tag like this, and I regret that I have been so delayed in coming up with this. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.